Good afternoon, Facebook. This is Saagar and Enjeti with my colleague Kevin Daley. We are coming at you live from the Daily Caller studio here in Washington, D.C. Alternative Facts, episode 15.
We've had a longer run than Megyn Kelly's news magazine.
That's true. That's true. You know, many people are calling it historic. So as usual, we need you guys to check in on Facebook, check in with your GPS coordinates, share your location with me on iMessage. I want to know exactly where you are at all times. If you're deplorable, we need to know that.
These check-ins are why we do this program.
I do this for you. Like, this isn't for me. I need to know where all of you are.
Saagar and I don't particularally like each other, but we love the deplorables.
But we love you. Exactly. All right, so Kevin and I are pretty hungover right now. It's rough goings here. But we've decided we still have to come at you with some big alternative facts. So number one, we're going to start with Puerto Rico. So tell us what's happening, Kev.
Well, a lot of people in the legacy media are attempting to gin up this story about the administration's allegedly sluggish response to the disaster in Puerto Rico. Now, to be clear, there is terrible human suffering taking place in Puerto Rico right now. The island has been completely ravished by not one, but two hurricanes. And rebuilding is probably going to take a significant period of time. And it's also true that federal resources have not yet reached vast swaths of the island. But people in the media are attempting to use this situation to indict President Trump. And that is just not an accurate assessment of the current state of affairs.
This is making me really, really upset. Because you should see that Joy Reid tweet where she basically is saying there's completely inadequate response, et cetera, et cetera. This is ridiculous. They are trying so desperately to turn this into President Trump's Katrina, and it's cynical. Here are the facts. Puerto Rico is an island of 3.4 million people. Its ports destroyed. Electrical grid destroyed. Water system destroyed. They literally cannot call each other on a cell phone. The U.S. military, the most advanced force on the face of the earth, is using a messenger system.
Unbelievable.
They had better comms in World War I.
We're back to the Pony Express.
They had better communications during World War I with the telegraph.
Wow.
That's how insane this is.
Yeah, I think some of this is just a function of the fact that people do not appreciate the scope of this disaster.
Yeah.
Every functional port of entry in Puerto Rico has been destroyed. Now, we understand that most operations are being run out of San Juan, which makes sense. San Juan is the largest city on the island. It has the highest concentration of people. But it's still virtually impossible for first responders to move to the interior parts of the island because roads have not been cleared, communications have not been established with San Juan, and there is very little sense of what these communities need right now.
One of the stupidest things I saw this week was somebody saying, "Oh, but Puerto Rico is the same distance as Miami is to Philadelphia. Just get it done, President Trump." Well, there's this thing called the ocean.
Yeah.
All right? Like, it's 1,000 miles from the nearest U.S. state. I don't think anybody understands how vast of a distance that is.
Stephanie Rule on MSNBC made the point on Katie Tur's program that if this disaster had taken place in Illinois, that somehow the response would be different. Which one says yes? Of course, absolutely, it would be different because Illinois is easily accessible. From the American mainland.
There's only 350. There's only 350 National Guardsmen on the entire island of Puerto Rico. There's only a couple hundred more in the U.S. Virgin Islands, which is the closest place. You can't just mobilize, get in a truck, and drive.
Right.
Everything has to be brought by boat. And when you bring in by boats and ships, what happens? You have to dock them at ports. Oh wait, all the ports destroyed. They only have daytime operations right now. We're talking about an airlift for millions and millions of people. And I've seen so many interviews of Puerto Ricans being like, "Where is the cavalry?" et cetera, et cetera. It's like, guys, it is a miracle that they are still restoring power to hospitals and still distributing water. That they're like, we haven't seen any federal officials. It's like, it's hard to get to.
I can't imagine a worse source to turn to for information than somebody in a remote part of Puerto Rico right now. They have absolutely no sense of what's happening, and we keep them in our prayers, and we want to furnish as much aid to them as they need. But they really are in no position to judge the response to this disaster. And furthermore, I think that the Trump administration, from the start of the hurricane season, has been alert to the political disaster that was Katrina during the Bush administration, and for that reason, they have made a point of vigorous and fast responses to all disasters, and they've also made a point of stressing that President Trump is intimately involved with disaster response at every level. And furthermore, this feels to me like criticizing Trump just to criticize Trump.
It is
leveraging on tragic and unbelievable human suffering to dunk on the president, and it's unseemly.
It's unseemly. It's disgusting. It is disgusting. Because the point is at the end of the day, they don't really care about helping the 3.4 million people on Puerto Rico. They care about, destroying the reputation of the president. And I mean, you can see the frustration in many of his tweets and what he was talking about when he was like, yeah, there's a massive ocean in between us. And it's like you could send an entire carrier strike group, but they don't have the resources in order to even get the things onto the island.
This is to say nothing of the decades of administrative mismanagement on Puerto Rico. I mean, the response infrastructure in place on Puerto Rico is poorly managed and ridden by corruption. I mean, there's just levels and levels of challenges here that people don't appreciate and are frankly ignoring because they want to land a blow against President Trump.
Decades of mismanagement, decades of under infrastructure. Yeah, we do. I mean, the clips that we want to roll is in our next segment, and that's about the NFL. So, as you could tell, Kevin and I are very hopped up about this because I legitimately don't think that these people actually care. I just do not think that we would see any of this sort of outrage or any of this sort of of spotlight in an Obama administration.
I'm
almost sure of it.
That's absolutely
they would
true.
be hailed for caring. I mean, the president's on his way.
We would have moved on.
Yeah, we would have moved on.
About the hurricane. Well, maybe we would be talking about what the hurricane season indicates about climate change. But
yeah.
I mean, that is the extent to which we would be discussing.
That's what we would be talking about. The devastating effects of climate change. All right, well, we're going to move on to the NFL. I wanted to show you the stupidest take that we saw from the NFL. There were a lot. There were a lot. But let's go ahead and roll this clip.
I guess Newt Gingrich doesn't realize Abraham Lincoln didn't fight to free slaves because it was affecting him personally. Can't you use your position, Marvin, of influence to help those who don't have a voice like you do? Then if you're the party of Lincoln, then how does Newt Gingrich justify that Abraham Lincoln fought to free slaves? He didn't need to do that.
All right, everybody. So there you go. We have Stephanie Ruhle comparing.
She's taking some hits on today's alternative facts.
Yeah, she's a popular target. So she compared the NFL protesters to Abraham Lincoln.
Wow.
And Kevin,
in the first place, I don't understand how she could argue that President Lincoln was not personally affected by the cause of abolition. The war that he waged in the service of that cause drove him into deep bouts of depression from which he never recovered. So I'm really not quite sure what she's getting at there. And I also think that there's, as usual, absolutely no sense of proportion.
No, absolutely not.
And no nuance when the press is discussing these issues. To be sure, there are tragic challenges that this country is still grappling with on the race line in the 21st century. But I don't understand how you could prudently compare this to the Civil War. It's just truly beyond me.
The disgusting comparison to the Civil War is obviously awful. But what really gets me is that they're saying, no, this is a protest of police violence. But the fact of the matter is that Kaepernick has maintained from the very beginning that our country, for having police violence disproportionately affect African Americans, makes it not worthy enough to stand up for. And I think it's disingenuous for everyone to say, no, President Trump doesn't want you to pay attention to police violence. It's like, that's not what this is about. Sorry, yeah.
No, I mean, I'm willing to see that the protest may mean different things to different players.
Right.
But I also think that there's been no sense of proportion in covering the response of many Americans.
Right.
This issue in many ways is kind of like a classic Trump issue, to the extent that in the first place, this does not implicate any policy matter whatever, doesn't implicate a tangible political victory in any way, and yet a significant majority of the American people, 60%, according to a poll that I saw, agree with the president on this issue, and the media has absolutely no sense of that. So it's sort of like Trump absolutely has the sense of what the American people feel about this issue. They strongly agree with him, according to the polls, and the media has no sense of that. But of course, it doesn't matter because there's nothing to be won on this issue.
That's the real thing is here. This is all just, it's a crapshoot for everybody involved. And it turns into President Trump is a racist. I mean, I saw a tweet from Ryan Lizza where he was like, Trump has attacked only Jamel Hill, Steph Curry, and Colin Kaepernick.
What are those three people?
What do those three people have? And it's like, can cherry pick anybody.
Yeah.
Somebody responded
Jim
to it.
Acosta,
Yeah.
Mika Brzezinski,
Yeah.
people whose last
Yeah.
names end in vowels.
Woo! Yeah, it's like, I mean, that's a perfect point. It's just like the campaign out there to turn him into a racist, to make anybody who he attacks and elevate them to a level of President Lincoln, to make it an untouchable moral force, is all like a concerted campaign of character assassination. Trump isn't perfect, you know. We can, but to ascribe him the worst motive out of the gate, I think is disingenuous.
Yeah, always. I mean,
Yeah.
it seems.
We've talked about this before.
Yeah, and I'll repeat my point
Yeah.
because I think it's an important one that we should never first assume malice when we can first make some other assumption as to motive.
Exactly.
That is irresponsible as a matter of ethics, and it also is deeply unfair.
Yeah.
And I'd further say that the press seems to have absolutely no sense of how fans are reacting to this. I was not surprised to hear my own Buffalo Bills Mafia rain boos down on the team for taking a knee during the anthem. Colin Kaepernick had his first start in last year's season at the Ralph in Buffalo. And the tailgate was brutal. There were some really shocking images, disappointing images, frankly, that came out of there. There were effigies of Colin Kaepernick that were getting tackled. People were calling him a Muslim. His jersey was being burned. I was not surprised to see any of that, having spent over 20 years of my life in Buffalo. And by the way, having deep and abiding affection for that town. But it was totally unsurprising to see the fans in a very democratic area of the country react extremely negatively to that. And the press seems to have no sense of that.
They have absolutely no sense on how big of an attack this feels upon the American institution, on how, frankly, a lot of this anger isn't even about the flag itself. It's about that this is the one refuge that many people had. We talked about this last week, is that they're trying to inject politics into literally everything.
Right.
Can't watch football without politics. We can't watch late night comedy without politics.
Right.
You can't watch a freaking commercial without politics.
The reason this protest in particular is so destructive is because it is aimed at truly the last, perhaps the last, symbol around which every American can rally and to which every American can show their respect. And I've said before, we organize our society around symbols and around rituals, and this is one of the last ones that we had, and now it seems that this is on the chopping block too, and this is disastrous for social cohesion.
Honestly,
in this country.
I think it's ruined.
Kneeling during the national anthem is a direct attack on the social cohesion of this country.
I could not agree more. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Alternative Facts, episode 15, Puerto Rico and the NFL. These are things on our mind.
Hang in there, Puerto Rico.
Yeah, hang in there.
We're thinking of you.
We are actually
thinking of you.